Well, the key to good writing is clarity, but many people don't understand correct English. If you think that decimate means to destroy, that disinterested and uninterested can be used interchangeably, if you write actually, basically, or at this moment in time, or that you literally jump out of your skin, well, you have a poor grasp of the English language. Many people feel let down by our education system and wish they spoke or wrote better English. But it's never too late, and the club is not exclusive. To address the frequent errors, common misunderstandings, and stylistic howlers of English language, let's hear from the master English stylist, Simon Heffer. He's been a journalist for 4 decades at British publications, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, and the Spectator. Simon Heffer is Professor of Modern History at the University of Buckingham, and he's author of well-acclaimed books on English language: Strictly English, Simply English, and most recently, Scarcely English, an A to Z of assaults on our language. And Simon Heffer has been the scholar in residence at the Centre for Independent Studies in 2025. Simon, why did you decide to write these books on English language?
Well, a publisher asked me and offered me a nice sum of money to do so, is the short answer. I was then an executive at the Daily Telegraph in London, and we were going through a phase of having various, both factual and grammatical mistakes in the paper or words used wrongly. And the then editor asked me if I would monitor these and send out a weekly email to the staff to tell them where mistakes had been made. And I did this for a number of months, and I never named any of my colleagues. The purpose of this is not to humiliate anybody, but I just pointed out errors that had been made in the hope they wouldn't be made again. And eventually, these emails, when there were about 20 or 30 of them, were leaked onto the internet. And the man who's now my publisher saw them and rang me up and said, would I please write a book on them? And so eventually he was very persuasive, and I did.
So the book came from these original emails to your staff colleagues.
Yeah.
But who did you write the book for? Or sorry, whom did you write the book for?
Or for whom did I write the book?
For whom?
Yes, because there's a stylistic, look, it's a prejudice, but many people say you shouldn't end a sentence with a preposition. Sometimes you can, and I have done. Winston Churchill famously mocked this by saying, this is the sort of English up with which I will not put. So there are moments where such complex constructions, it's easier to end with a...
Okay, so for whom did you write the book?
Well, I wrote it for people who had been failed by, in my case, the British education system, where not only are people not taught proper English grammar anymore, and I mean, I went to secondary school in the 1970s, and I was taught very well. But the other advantage that my generation had, and particularly I had, was we learned foreign languages. I was very lucky at school that I was taught French, Latin, and Greek. And if you learn a foreign language, you learn all about the rudiments of grammar and the components of language, how a sentence is put together, how a paragraph is put together, and why paragraphs end where they do. And because we went through a phase in Britain between about 2005 and 2015 when nobody studied a foreign language at school, which I thought was deplorable, a lot of people never had even that basic grounding in what grammar is. And when I wrote this book, or the first of the books, which was Strictly English in 2010, I had an awful lot of letters from people who'd read it saying that they'd reached a certain position in their careers where they had a very serious public interface, where they had to write a lot of letters to important clients and customers, and they were conscious that they weren't always getting it right, and they felt that having this book, this compendium to hand, was a means of getting it right and not embarrassing themselves.
Your critics, they complain you're trying to stop the development of the English language, and that language is always evolving. This is their argument, and that there is a case for bending the rules of grammar. Your response?
Well, grammar and vocabulary are two different things. I don't think there's an excuse for bending the rules of grammar unless it clears up an ambiguity. And our grammar has evolved in English in a way to provide clarity of expression. Vocabulary is a different matter altogether. Of course, meanings of words change, and sometimes with very good reason, sometimes out of ignorance. Also, because there are new inventions, new discoveries, we have to use old words to mean new things. When I was growing up, a web was something that was constructed by a spider. Now it's another term for the internet, and it's a perfectly valuable term for the internet. So I'm not against words changing, and those people who've said, oh, I'm trying to stop language in its tracks, are wrong. What I am trying to do is to ensure that the clarity of expression that's given by correct grammar is maintained. I'm also trying to resist the unnecessary change in meanings of words in English. I mean, we went through a phase, I think it's over now, where people use the word flaunt, which means to parade something, as a synonym for the word flout, which means to ignore a rule or something like that. And these two words both began with F and ended in T, otherwise they had no resemblance at all. And to use one for the other was just stupidity.
Okay, well, let's go through some other howlers. This is a common mistake. People say, she gave it to my husband and I. What's wrong with that?
Well, I is the pronoun that is used in the nominative or as a subject of a sentence. You say, Tom and I were having a conversation. But if somebody walks in here and gives us a slice of cake each, we would say, she came into the room and gave Tom and me a slice of cake, because it is the object of the verb, not the subject. I think that...
It's like Simon and me are not going up the road. Simon and I are going up the road.
That's right. And a lot of this was down to the grammatically perfect late Queen, who would always talk about my husband and I.
Right.
And I think people thought, oh, it's correct always to say my husband and I. Well, it's correct if you're saying my husband and I are going to open a new school. You would say, however, the school was opened by my husband and me.
I should have done that.
I should have done that.
Yeah, you'll hear that a lot though, won't you?
Yes, and that's been going around in slang in England, certainly as long as I've been alive, and probably quite a long time before. And it's down to a mishearing of the auxiliary verb. People think they hear somebody say, I should have, and in fact they said, I should have.
Well, let's put these on the screen. Here are a few more examples, Simon. Amount and number, the difference there.
You can have an amount of something that is singular. So you can say, I've got a large amount of butter, but I've got a large number of peas, because there are many individual peas. So it's comparable with the difference between less and fewer.
Yes.
You would say, I've got less butter than he's got, but I've got fewer peas than she's got.
Very good, yes. Alternative.
Well, you can only have two alternatives, and many people say, well, there are four alternatives. There aren't. There are four options. And this goes back to the meaning of the Latin word. Alter in Latin means the other. And so you can say there are alternatives. You don't need to say two alternatives, because that's tautological. Two is understood. If you start saying there are three or four alternatives, then you're entirely wrong. There are options.
Area. Some people say that CIS is a public policy research organisation, publish articles across a wide range of policy areas. What's wrong with area?
Well, it's a metaphor. It's not strictly wrong. I would say policy subjects, or just simply policies.
Or matters.
Or matters.
Issues.
But again, it's used of a metaphor, and it's caught on.
Between.
Well, you can only be between two things. You can be among more than that.
That's right.
That table is between us.
Yes.
But if there were several tables and several people, those tables would be among us.
Okay. What's the difference between convince and persuade?
Well, to convince somebody is to make them absolutely certain of it quite easily. To persuade someone is to engage in a form of advocacy. I mean, in court, a lawyer is seeking to persuade a jury to come to a certain decision. He only succeeds when he has convinced them.
What about choice? You frequently hear someone say, you have two choices.
Well, that again is a tautology. A choice is a decision you make between two things. Somebody say, well, we'll say, you've got two choices. You haven't, you've got a choice. If somebody has got three choices, then they have got three separate choices between three lots of two different things.
What about a company of an organisation is looking at the different models to improve their efficiency, and it's a dilemma?
Well, you can only have a dilemma between two options.
Yes.
The Greek word means an object with two tails. And so you can't say, oh, I've got a dilemma, I've got to choose between three things. That's a trilemma, by the way.
Collide and collision.
Well, two things have to be moving to have a collision. If a car is driving down the road and it hits another car that's moving, or a pedestrian who's walking, or a cyclist, that's a collision. If it drives into a tree, it's just driven into a tree. It's not a collision.
You'll often hear the word decimate. You know, in sports, for example, one team has decimated the opposition. What's wrong with decimate?
Well, it comes from the Latin, which was a punishment, where if there was some problem in a legion, every 10th man, decimus being the Latin word for 10th, every 10th man would be killed. So if you decimate something, you reduce its strength by a 10th. So if you see a picture after a terrible weather accident, like a cyclone, of a forest that had thousands of trees in it and there's only 3 left standing, it's been devastated. It hasn't been decimated. It would be decimated if 10% of the trees had been taken down.
Dissatisfied and unsatisfied. See, many people would say, what's the real difference?
Well, if you're unsatisfied, you tend to be people say that the demand has been unsatisfied. There was a demand for something and it's not been fulfilled. Dissatisfied means you tried something, you didn't like it.
What about enquiry and inquiry? So E versus I. What's the difference there?
In British English, and I don't know whether this applies in Australia or indeed in America, an inquiry with a capital I is usually an official event. It's where there'll be an inquiry into some outrage or an inquiry into a government failing. An inquiry is what I would make if I telephone somebody and ask them a question.
Numbers. You're putting forward several arguments in an essay. First or firstly? Second or secondly?
First. First is effectively an adjectival phrase. Firstly is an adverb. So I would say, firstly I opened the door, and secondly I sat down at the table. And so that's qualifying the two verbs as adverbs.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you're just listing points, you say, first, I disagree with this. Second, I disagree with that.
What about the use of the word hopefully? And I'll put this in a sentence. When someone says, hopefully Mary will be given a better report next term, what is he saying?
He's either saying, I hope Mary will be given a better report next term, or it is to be hoped that Mary will be given a better report next term. This highlights an important difference between written English and spoken English. I think virtually everybody now would say hopefully if they're having a conversation. But if you're writing something formally, it's wrong. It's glaringly wrong. It's sloppy English. You would say, I hope, or it is to be hoped.
The word fulsome, we often hear about someone making a fulsome apology. What's wrong with the word fulsome?
It literally means, another good word to talk about.
Yes, we'll get to that.
It literally means saying something, in that case, with insincerity. If something is fulsome, it's over the top, it's laid on with a trowel, it's too much.
Well, you mentioned the word literally, and it's one of the more abused words in our tongue. This is what you've said. One hears people say, quote, he literally jumped out of his skin.
Yes.
What's wrong with that?
And you hear people say, I literally died. Well, if they had literally died, they wouldn't be talking about it. It's ridiculous.
It's very true. People make that mistake all the time.
Yeah, they use it to emphasise the gravity of what happened to them. But you should really only use it if it's actually happened.
Yes.
So you can say, I literally sat down and spoke to him for half an hour, that's fine. But to say, I literally flew off the handle, that is crazy.
What about compared to and compared with? Why the different prepositions to and with?
Well, compared to is usually used metaphorically, and compared with is usually used literally. So Shakespeare wrote, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Because that's a metaphor. But you could take two should we say, laptops and say, this laptop compared with this laptop is better.
Okay. Now, in your latest book, Scarcely English, you argue that British English is being assailed by American usage like never before. How so?
I think it's because of the tremendous influence that American film, television, song, streaming, social media, what these have done to our interpretation of or our use of English in Britain. And there's also, say, the culture of fast food, corporate culture. I talk in my new book about fast food speak and corporate speak. I mean, one of my publisher actually rang me up when I was writing Scarcely English and said, I've got a real horror for you. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, I was at a meeting today and somebody talked about a new member of the board being onboarded. And if you onboard someone, you bring them onto your board. And I thought if you went on board, you got on a ship or possibly an aircraft. And I thought this was a joke. And about a week later, I was sitting in a hotel waiting to do something, waiting to go to a meeting. And I heard a woman on her mobile telephone say, and how's his onboarding going? And I thought, my God, it really does happen. And this is apparently a phrase from American corporate speak.
Or fast food speak.
Well, fast food speak, yes. Can I get a pizza?
Yeah, or can I get a burger?
Can I get a burger?
Now, what's wrong with that? Can I get a burger?
Well, that implies strictly that you're going to move yourself from where you are and go into the kitchen and physically pick up the burger.
Right, yeah.
I years ago, I was in a restaurant with a colleague. I'd never heard this before. And he was taking me out to lunch. It was very kind of him. And we ordered food. And I said, please, can I have the spaghetti? And he said, can I get the pizza? And I envisaged him getting out of his chair, walking into the kitchen, taking the pizza and bringing it back.
Yeah,
to put on
now
the
you're
table.
right. For a nation brought up on fish and chips, it's astonishing we did not develop this ourselves. But some people, Simon, would say to you, are you being pedantic here?
Well, of course I am. And look, I don't expect people to adapt their everyday speech to do this. I mean, if somebody rings me up at home, I answer my landline, and they say, could they speak to me? And I'll say it's me. I won't say it is I, which sounds as if I'm making a great theatrical pronouncement. However, if I were writing, I wouldn't say it's him. I'd say it is he. I think there's a difference.
Because it is he doing something, right?
Yes.
It is he with the verb.
It is.
You're going to say it is him.
Well, you might write that something happened. I'm a historian, so I might write something happened in the past. I said no one could work out who had done this, and I would say it was he, because the verb to be takes the nominative case, not the.
Let's deal with some
accusative.
other Americanisms. Call out. What's wrong with call out?
Oh well, that is. I don't like call out for two reasons. It's not English, and also it's about humiliating people. If I'm going to call him or her out for saying something unwoke that I don't like very much.
What should you say?
I wouldn't say anything at all, actually. And if I were going to criticise somebody for something he or she had said, I would reprimand them.
Yes.
Or draw attention to the fact that they'd said it.
Very good. Okay. What about stepping up to the plate and think outside the box?
Well, I believe they're both American sporting terms. You're a great expert on American sport.
Baseball.
I'm a cricketer. I don't recall ever stepping up to a plate in cricket, or indeed thinking outside the box. Again, they are ludicrous American metaphors in corporate speak. Now, if you are an American and you're running an American company in America, this is absolutely fine. Yeah. But people in Britain who use it just look silly or sound silly.
What about witnesses? Can't they take the stand?
They can in America, because...
What should they do instead in Britain?
Well, in Britain,
or Australia, for that matter?
Go into the witness box.
Go into the witness box, right. What about
give evidence.
Or give evidence. Double down. You often hear that a lot. Double down.
Well, that's just
like a politician doubling down on a policy.
Yes, whereas what they're really doing is emphasising or re-emphasising something they've already said.
I think Barack Obama, in one of his presidential inaugural addresses, talked about the word enormity.
Yes, and he was talking about, and again, this is correct American usage, He was talking about the size of the task that confronted him, and quite right too. In British English, an enormity is an outrage. If somebody goes and murders somebody, they have committed an enormity.
So all of this is important, not least because young people, when they're applying for jobs, they need to write good cover letters with their resumes so they can influence their employer.
Yes, I used to hire people for my newspaper's graduate trainee scheme, and I just used to chuck away applications. Well, I acknowledged them, of course, but I wouldn't consider anybody who couldn't write English properly, who couldn't spell properly.
Especially in the craft of journalism.
Absolutely, and put grammatical errors in. Because, I mean, one reason my editor all those years ago, this was in 2008, I think, that I started sending these emails. One reason he asked me to do it was that my newspaper has a highly sophisticated and intelligent readership, and they are very alert to mistakes, and the newspaper is not cheap, and they would be in the habit of writing in and saying, I'm not spending all this money on your journalism for it to be presented to me in a slapdash way, and quite right too.
Well, Simon's books are called Strictly English, Simply English, and most recently, Scarcely English. They're sound reference office. Let me just say this: they're sound reference books. They're sound reference books. They're They apostrophe re.
That's
Some
right.
people do say There or even Their.
Yes, there is simply a statement about where something is. There, Their, is a pronoun. Their house, their car, and there is a contraction of they are.
Well, they're sound reference books, and They apostrophe re. They're sound reference book for officers. Simon, always great to have you at CIS.
Thank you, Tom. Nice to talk to you.